The sharp crack of a slammed dressing room door echoed through the silent backstage hallway. Hyunjin stood frozen, his breathing uneven, while Felix walked away without looking back, his clenched fists trembling at his sides. For one impossible second, even the distant roar of thousands of fans waiting inside the arena seemed to disappear. Only the heavy silence remained between them. No one dared to move. The staff exchanged anxious glances. Makeup artists lowered their brushes. Managers whispered into their headsets, trying to understand what had just happened. Only 30 minutes remained before the concert. Felix stopped at the end of the hallway and leaned against the cold concrete wall. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. He shut his eyes, hoping everything would fade away, but the words Hyunjin had spoken moments earlier kept replaying in his mind. "I can't keep pretending anymore." Those 6 words hurt more than Felix wanted to admit. For months, everyone had admired the effortless teamwork between them. Cameras captured laughter, rehearsals, and playful conversations. Fans saw smiles, interviews showed confidence. On stage, they looked inseparable. Behind closed doors, however, something had slowly begun to crack, not because of jealousy, not because of fame, because both of them had started carrying secrets that neither had the courage to share. Felix had always hidden his worries behind bright smiles. Whenever stress overwhelmed him, he developed a strange habit of polishing the silver bracelet around his wrist until it gleamed. It was a gift from someone important long before he became an idol, and touching it reminded him that he had survived difficult days before. Hyunjin noticed that habit months ago. Every time Felix became anxious, his fingers would unconsciously find the bracelet. Today, Hyunjin had watched him do it again, and that frightened him. Inside another dressing room, Hyunjin stared at his own reflection. His flawless appearance could fool anyone. His eyes could not. Dark circles hid beneath carefully applied makeup. Endless rehearsals, sleepless nights, and the pressure of perfection had slowly exhausted him. Yet none of those burdens compared to the fear that had settled inside him after receiving an anonymous message earlier that morning. Someone close to you is about to leave forever. No sender, no explanation, only those haunting words. Hyunjin had deleted the message immediately, convincing himself it was nothing more than a cruel prank, until he noticed Felix acting strangely during rehearsal, missing choreography, forgetting cues, smiling only when cameras pointed toward him. Everything suddenly felt connected. A gentle knock interrupted Hyunjin's thoughts. Their manager stepped inside. Waiting. Hyunjin nodded silently. He wanted to apologize. He wanted to explain. Instead, he simply stood up. Across the hallway, Felix was doing exactly the same. Neither realized they were walking toward the stage from opposite directions. The arena lights dimmed. 40,000 voices erupted into deafening cheers. A countdown appeared on the massive screens. 10, 9, 8. The members gathered in the darkness behind the stage entrance. Normally, Felix and Hyunjin exchanged encouraging smiles before every concert. Tonight, they avoided each other's eyes. The opening music exploded through the stadium. Columns of fire illuminated the stage. As they stepped into the dazzling lights, the audience saw confident performers ready to deliver another unforgettable night. Only the members themselves knew how fragile that confidence truly was. The first song began flawlessly. Every movement was precise, every vocal remained steady. Professionalism carried them forward, yet beneath every synchronized dance step, an invisible distance separated Felix and Hyunjin. There was once a moment in the choreography when they faced each other with bright smiles. Tonight, their expressions remained controlled, almost mechanical. Only the closest cameras captured the brief hesitation before they continued dancing. No fan noticed, or so they believed. During a short transition between songs, Felix accidentally glanced toward Hyunjin. For a heartbeat, everything around them disappeared. He saw exhaustion, regret, fear, not anger. That realization unsettled him far more than their earlier argument. Maybe Hyunjin had never wanted to fight. Maybe he had simply been afraid. As the concert continued, memories slowly resurfaced inside Felix's mind. Late-night practices, shared meals after exhausting rehearsals, conversations about homesickness, dreams they had promised never to abandon. Somewhere along the way, silence had replaced honesty. They had become experts at protecting everyone except each other. Near the final performance, an unexpected technical malfunction caused part of the stage lighting to fail. The audience barely noticed. Backstage, however, panic spread instantly. Crew members rushed between control panels. One unstable lighting rig remained suspended above a section of the stage where the choreography would end in less than 30 seconds. The warning reached Hyunjin first. Without thinking, he abandoned his planned position and crossed the stage. Felix looked up just as Hyunjin grabbed his arm. Move! The massive lighting frame crashed onto the stage only moments after they jumped away. The impact echoed throughout the arena. Smoke filled the air. Fans screamed in shock before realizing everyone was safe. The concert paused briefly while staff secured the equipment. Still holding Felix's arm, Hyunjin finally spoke with complete honesty. "I wasn't angry with you." Felix looked into his eyes. "I was terrified of losing you." The words carried no performance, no cameras, no rehearsed emotions, only truth. Felix slowly smiled for the first time that day. So was I. Neither of them had realized how much silence had distorted their fears. Sometimes the greatest misunderstandings were not born from hatred, but from conversations that never happened. When the concert resumed, they returned to the stage side by side. This time, when the choreography brought them face to face, their smiles were genuine. The audience cheered louder than ever, believing they were witnessing another unforgettable performance. Only Felix and Hyunjin understood that the most important moment of the night had happened far away from the spotlight, where honesty had finally become stronger than fear. And as the final fireworks painted brilliant colors across the dark sky above the stadium, both of them silently promised that no secret, no pressure, and no misunderstanding would ever be allowed to build another wall between them again. Morning arrived quietly, but the memory of the previous night's incident refused to disappear. The rehearsal studio was unusually silent. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, painting long golden lines across the polished floor. The familiar scent of wood, fresh coffee, and recently cleaned equipment filled the room. Yet the comforting atmosphere failed to ease the tension lingering in everyone's hearts. Felix arrived first. He placed his backpack beside the wall and instinctively reached for the silver bracelet around his wrist. His thumb traced its worn edges while his thoughts wandered back to the moment Hyunjin had pulled him away from the falling lighting rig. 1 second later, everything could have been different. The realization still made his heartbeat quicken. The studio door opened. Hyunjin stepped inside carrying 2 cups of coffee. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Then Hyunjin walked forward and quietly held out one of the cups. "I remembered your favorite." Felix accepted it with a small smile. "Thank you." It was only 2 simple words, but somehow they carried more meaning than countless conversations they had avoided over the past several months. The silence between them no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt careful. Both of them understood that trust, once shaken, needed time to become steady again. Before either could continue the conversation, the rest of the members entered the studio one by one, filling the room with laughter and casual greetings. The atmosphere immediately became brighter, but a few curious glances drifted toward Felix and Hyunjin. News of the stage accident had spread quickly online. Fans praised the professionalism everyone had shown during the concert, while countless videos analyzed every second of the incident. Fortunately, no one knew what had happened before the performance. The argument remained their private burden. Practice began. Music thundered through the speakers as choreography resumed from the beginning. At first everything felt normal, then came the section where Felix and Hyunjin danced side by side. Without planning it, they exchanged a brief glance. This time there was no hesitation, no uncertainty, only quiet understanding. Their synchronization returned naturally, as though their movements had remembered a friendship that their hearts had nearly forgotten. Their dance instructor noticed immediately. "There it is," he said with a satisfied nod. "That's the connection I was looking for." Felix laughed softly. Hyunjin smiled without realizing it. For the first time in weeks, rehearsing felt enjoyable again. During lunch, however, an unexpected visitor arrived. The production director entered carrying a thin black folder, reviewed the security reports from last night. Room fell silent. The equipment failure wasn't caused by normal wear. Every conversation stopped. "What do you mean?" Felix asked. The director opened the folder and placed several photographs on the table. One of the support cables had been partially cut before the concert, not completely, just enough to weaken it. A chill spread across the room. "So," Hyunjin whispered. "It wasn't simply an accident." Director nodded slowly. "Investigation is still ongoing, so I need everyone to remain calm. Until we know more, please avoid discussing this publicly." No one answered. The cheerful mood that had begun to return disappeared instantly. Felix stared at the photographs. Someone had tampered with the equipment. Someone had placed everyone on that stage in danger. Hyunjin folded his arms, his expression growing thoughtful rather than frightened. The anonymous message from the previous morning suddenly returned to his memory. "Someone close to you is about to leave forever." He had dismissed it as a cruel joke. Now he wasn't so sure. After rehearsal ended, the building gradually emptied. Felix remained behind, organizing his belongings. As he prepared to leave, he noticed a folded piece of paper tucked beneath his backpack. There was no name, only a single handwritten sentence. "Some truths are more dangerous than secrets." His smile faded. He looked around the empty studio. The hallway outside was deserted. Whoever had left the note was already gone. Felix quietly slipped the paper into his pocket before walking outside, where Hyunjin was waiting near the entrance. "You ready?" Hyunjin asked. Felix looked at the folded note, then back at his friend. For the first time since everything had happened, he chose honesty. "Think something bigger is going on." Hyunjin studied his expression and nodded. "Then we'll figure it out together." They walked into the fading afternoon light side by side, unaware that from the upper floor of the building, someone was watching them through a narrow window before silently pulling the curtain closed. The following afternoon, rain drummed softly against the studio windows, wrapping the building in a grey silence that felt heavier than usual. Felix unfolded the anonymous note once again. "Some truths are more dangerous than secrets." Handwriting was neat, almost elegant, yet completely unfamiliar. He had shown it only to Hyunjin before slipping it back into his pocket. Neither of them wanted to alarm the others until they understood what it meant. Rehearsal continued as scheduled, but concentration came with difficulty. Every unexpected sound made someone look over a shoulder. Every unfamiliar face in the hallway attracted quiet attention. During a short break, Hyunjin stood near the practice room window, watching the rain race down the glass. "I keep thinking about that message," he admitted. Felix joined him. "When you received before the concert," Hyunjin nodded. "It felt meaningless then. Now it doesn't." Felix remained silent for a moment before speaking. "Maybe whoever sent it wasn't trying to threaten you." Hyunjin turned to him. "What if they were trying to warn me?" The possibility settled between them without another word. Later that evening, the company announced an internal inspection of every performance venue and every piece of stage equipment. Security procedures became noticeably stricter. Staff members carried identification badges everywhere, and unfamiliar visitors were politely questioned before entering restricted areas. Even so, the uneasy feeling refused to disappear. As rehearsal ended, one of the senior technicians approached Felix. "I found something you should see." He led Felix and Hyunjin into the equipment storage room. On a workbench rested the damaged steel cable from the concert. The technician pointed toward one section. "These marks," they leaned closer. The cable hadn't snapped naturally. Tiny, deliberate cuts surrounded the broken strands, each almost impossible to notice unless examined closely. "It took patience to do this," the technician said quietly. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. Felix felt a chill run through him. This had not been an impulsive act. Someone had planned it. Someone had waited. On their way home, the rain finally stopped, leaving the streets glistening beneath the city lights. Neither Felix nor Hyunjin spoke much. Instead, they walked at an unhurried pace, allowing the quiet to settle around them. After several blocks, Hyunjin finally broke the silence. "When we argued," Felix looked at him. "I wasn't really angry with you. I know. I was angry with myself." Felix frowned slightly. "I thought if I carried everything alone, I could protect everyone else, but all I did was push people away." Felix smiled gently. "I did the same thing." The first time in a long while, neither of them felt the need to hide behind reassuring smiles. They simply admitted what had always been true. They had been afraid, not of failure, not of criticism, but of becoming a burden to the people they cared about. The conversation left both of them feeling lighter. When they finally reached the company residence, the security guard called out to them. A delivery arrived earlier. He handed Felix a small, plain envelope. There was no return address, no company logo, only Felix's name written across the front. Inside was a single photograph. It showed the concert stage from several days before the performance. Most people would have seen nothing unusual. Hyunjin noticed it immediately. Near the lighting structure stood a person dressed entirely in black, their face hidden beneath a cap. On the back of the photograph, another handwritten sentence appeared. "You are looking in the wrong direction." Felix slowly lowered the photograph. Outside, thunder rolled across the dark sky once more. Neither he nor Hyunjin knew who had sent the picture. But for the first time, they realized someone else had been watching the same events long before they had noticed anything was wrong.
The photograph remained on the table long after midnight. Felix and Hyunjin sat across from each other in the quiet living room, studying every tiny detail beneath the warm glow of a desk lamp. Outside, the city had finally fallen asleep, but neither of them could bring themselves to rest. The mysterious figure dressed in black stood near the lighting structure, almost hidden among the stage crew. At first glance, the person appeared ordinary. The longer they looked, however, the more unusual the image became. "There," Hyunjin whispered. Felix leaned closer. The unknown person wasn't looking at the lighting equipment. They were looking directly toward the camera, as if they already knew someone was taking the photograph. A strange feeling settled over the room. Someone had been aware of everything from the very beginning. The next morning, they arrived at the company earlier than usual. The building was already busy with technicians preparing for upcoming performances, while security officers quietly inspected equipment throughout the backstage corridors. Felix carefully handed the photograph to the production director. "I think this might help." Director examined it for several moments before calling the head of security. Within minutes, several staff members gathered around the image. One of the security officers suddenly pointed toward a small corner of the photograph. "Zoom in here." Image became blurry as they enlarged it on a computer screen, but one detail slowly emerged. The unknown figure wore an employee identification card. The photograph itself was too unclear to reveal a name, yet the color of the badge identified the person as someone with authorized backstage access. Not an outsider, someone who belonged inside the venue. The room became silent. The production director folded his arms. "That narrows the investigation considerably." Felix exchanged a glance with Hyunjin. Neither of them spoke, but both understood the same thing. The danger had never come from outside. It had been much closer all along. Later that afternoon, rehearsals continued despite the ongoing investigation. The company insisted that normal routines should not be interrupted, believing stability would help everyone stay focused. Music once again filled the practice room. This time, however, every member noticed how often security personnel quietly passed by the glass walls. No one complained. Everyone understood why. During a break, Felix wandered into one of the smaller recording studios to clear his mind. The room was empty except for a piano standing beneath a single overhead light. Almost without thinking, he sat down and pressed a few gentle notes. The melody was simple, peaceful. It reminded him why he had chosen music in the first place, not for fame, but because music had always been the one place where fear seemed to lose its voice. A few moments later, the studio door opened. Hyunjin stepped inside. "I thought I'd find you here," Felix smiled. "You know me too well." Hyunjin sat beside him on the piano bench. Neither spoke for a while. Instead, Felix continued playing softly. The melody echoed through the empty room, replacing anxiety with quiet hope. Finally, Hyunjin broke the silence. No matter who did this, Felix stopped playing and looked at him. "We're not facing it alone anymore," Felix nodded. "No more secrets, more assumptions, no more silence." They sealed the promise with a quiet smile. For the first time since the concert, both of them felt that trust had truly begun to return. When evening arrived, the company announced that investigators had identified several people who had access to the damaged lighting system before the concert. Interviews would begin the following morning. As employees slowly left the building, one person lingered alone in a dark backstage hallway. Their footsteps echoed softly across the empty floor. They paused beside the storage room where the damaged cable had been examined only hours earlier. Without a word, they slipped a small flash drive into an envelope, wrote a single name across the front, and quietly placed it outside the production director's office before disappearing into the darkness. Whatever answers the investigation was about to uncover, they were finally beginning to surface, and the truth no longer seemed as distant as it once had. The envelope was waiting outside the production director's office when the first employees arrived the next morning. No one had seen who left it. There were no fingerprints on its smooth surface, no return address, and no note explaining its purpose. Only a single flash drive rested inside, carefully wrapped in plain white paper. The production director immediately called the head of security. Felix and Hyunjin, who had arrived early for rehearsal, were asked to wait in the conference room while the contents were examined. The atmosphere felt unusually calm, almost too calm. Outside the glass walls, staff members walked through the hallways as if it were an ordinary day, carrying coffee cups, rehearsal schedules, and costume bags. Yet everyone could sense that something important was about to happen. A technician connected the flash drive to a secure computer. The screen remained black for several seconds. Then a folder appeared. It contained security footage recorded 3 days before the concert. The timestamp confirmed it. The camera overlooked the backstage lighting area late at night, long after rehearsals had ended. Everyone in the room leaned closer. The recording showed several technicians finishing their work before leaving one by one. For nearly 15 minutes, nothing happened. Then another figure entered the frame. The person wore a company jacket and an employee badge hanging from a lanyard. Their face remained hidden beneath the shadow of a baseball cap, but their movements were calm and deliberate. They walked directly toward the lighting structure. No hesitation, no confusion. As if they already knew exactly where they were going, the figure examined one of the support cables, removed a small tool from a pocket, and carefully inspected the metal strands. After several moments, they stepped away and disappeared from the camera's view. The recording ended there. No actual sabotage appeared on screen, only suspicious behavior. Still, it was enough to change the direction of the investigation. The production director paused the video. "This person needs to be identified." Head of security nodded. "We'll compare employee records and access logs." Felix watched the frozen image carefully. Something about the person's posture felt strangely familiar, not their face, not their clothing, the way they walked. Hyunjin noticed Felix staring. "What is it?" Felix shook his head slowly. "Feel like I've seen that walk before. I can't remember where." Thought lingered in his mind long after the meeting ended. Later that afternoon, rehearsal resumed. The music echoed through the practice room, but Felix found himself distracted. Every time someone crossed the room, he instinctively observed the way they moved. Everyone walked differently. Some hurried, some shuffled, some carried themselves confidently. He was searching for a memory that refused to reveal itself. As rehearsal finished, the members gathered for dinner together. Conversation gradually shifted away from the investigation and toward lighter topics. Laughter slowly returned to the table, reminding Felix how much he had missed moments like these. Hyunjin watched everyone smiling. For the first time in days, hope quietly replaced fear. Whatever happened next, they still had each other. When dinner ended, Felix volunteered to return a stack of rehearsal folders to the production office. The building had become unusually quiet. Most employees had already gone home. As he walked through the dim hallway, he noticed a maintenance cart parked beside an open storage room. Nothing seemed unusual until he heard voices. They're getting closer. The words were barely louder than a whisper. Felix instinctively stopped. Another voice answered, calm and composed. Then we'll have to tell them before someone else does. Silence followed. A moment later, 2 employees stepped out of the storage room, continuing an ordinary conversation about rehearsal schedules as if nothing unusual had happened. Felix remained hidden around the corner until they disappeared. Had he misunderstood, or had those whispered words been connected to everything that had happened? He couldn't be certain. He quietly returned the folders and made his way back outside, where the evening air felt refreshingly cool. Hyunjin was waiting near the entrance. You took longer than expected. Felix looked back at the building one last time before answering. I think we're closer to the truth than we realize. Hyunjin smiled faintly. Then let's keep looking. They walked home together beneath a sky slowly filling with stars, carrying not only unanswered questions, but also a growing determination to uncover the truth with patience, honesty, and trust. Whatever lay ahead, they no longer faced it with fear, but with the quiet confidence that even the deepest mysteries could be solved when people refused to stop believing in one another. The investigation entered its second week, and little by little, the company began to breathe again. The rehearsals were no longer overshadowed by constant whispers. The damaged lighting system had been completely replaced, new safety inspections had been introduced, and every employee now understood how seriously the incident was being treated. Even so, one question remained unanswered. Who had delivered the anonymous photograph and the flash drive? Neither item had been accompanied by a demand or a threat. Whoever had sent them seemed interested only in revealing the truth. One afternoon, Felix and Hyunjin were invited to attend a private meeting with the production director and the head of security. The atmosphere was calm. A thick folder rested on the conference table. We've completed most of the investigation, the director began. He opened the folder and slid several documents across the table. The evidence suggests that the damaged cable was discovered during a late-night inspection several days before the concert. Felix looked up. Discovered? The security chief nodded. It appears the cable had already begun to weaken because of an unnoticed manufacturing defect. One of our technicians found the damage and attempted a temporary repair while waiting for replacement parts. Hyunjin frowned. But what about the cuts? The security chief showed them several close-up engineering photographs. What looked like deliberate cuts were actually inspection marks made during the emergency repair. Fortunately, the temporary reinforcement failed under the weight of the lighting equipment. Room became completely silent. So, Felix said quietly, there was no sabotage. The production director shook his head. None that we could prove. Suspicious footage. The technician was inspecting the cable. Anonymous messages. We still don't know who sent them. A long silence followed. For days, fear had filled the empty spaces where information was missing. Now those spaces were finally occupied by facts. The director folded his hands. Someone may have believed the company wasn't taking the problem seriously enough. Sending the photograph and the flash drive forced us to investigate more carefully. Hyunjin leaned back in his chair. So whoever sent them may actually have been trying to help. That's our best conclusion. Relief slowly settled over the room. The mystery had not ended with the discovery of a villain. Instead, it ended with the realization that misunderstandings, assumptions, and incomplete information had nearly caused far greater damage than the accident itself. That evening, the members gathered inside the rehearsal studio after everyone else had gone home. No cameras, no interviews, no audience, only music playing softly through the speakers. Felix looked around the familiar room. So much happened because none of us asked enough questions. Hyunjin smiled. And because we answered fear before we answered each other. Others laughed quietly. It was true. The hardest conversations were often the ones people postponed the longest. Felix gently turned the silver bracelet around his wrist. For weeks it had reminded him of anxiety. Tonight it reminded him of resilience. Hyunjin noticed the gesture and smiled. You don't seem nervous anymore, Felix laughed. I think I'll always get nervous. He looked around at his friends. But I don't think I'll carry it alone again. Rehearsal room fell silent, not an uncomfortable silence, a peaceful one. Outside the windows, the evening sky glowed with soft shades of orange and violet as the sun disappeared behind the city's skyline. The production director entered the room carrying a small envelope. We finally found the person who delivered the flash drive. Everyone looked up. It was one of our retired lighting supervisors. He'd reviewed old maintenance reports after hearing about the accident and realized they contained information that investigators might overlook. Wanting to avoid unnecessary attention, he anonymously delivered the evidence and photograph before quietly leaving the city to care for an ill family member. He never intended to frighten anyone. He simply wanted the truth to be examined carefully. Felix smiled with quiet gratitude. I hope we can thank him someday. So do I, Hyunjin replied. As they left the studio together, the building no longer felt heavy with unanswered questions. The hallways echoed with familiar laughter once again. The backstage doors that had witnessed fear now welcomed renewed confidence. Felix paused before stepping outside and glanced toward the stage that had almost become the site of tragedy. Instead of remembering the argument, he remembered the moment Hyunjin reached out his hand. One simple decision had reminded them both that friendship was not measured by the absence of conflict, but by the willingness to choose trust after misunderstanding. Together, they walked into the cool evening air, no longer carrying the weight of suspicion, but the quiet certainty that honesty, patience, and compassion would always be stronger than fear. And for the first time in many days, tomorrow felt wonderfully ordinary.
Several months passed, and life gradually found its familiar rhythm again. The memories of the concert incident became less painful with time. News articles stopped discussing the accident, fans turned their attention to new performances, and the company continued improving its safety procedures behind the scenes. For Felix and Hyunjin, however, the experience left something far more valuable than a lesson. It changed the way they communicated. Whenever one of them seemed unusually quiet after practice, the other no longer pretended not to notice. Whenever exhaustion became too heavy to hide, they spoke honestly instead of burying their emotions beneath reassuring smiles. Trust had become a habit. One crisp autumn morning, they returned to the same arena where everything had happened. The building looked exactly as Felix remembered, the bright entrance, the long backstage hallway, the dressing rooms lined neatly along polished floors. Even the scent of fresh paint and electrical equipment stirred memories that neither of them expected to feel so strongly. A charity concert was being held there, bringing together several artists to raise money for children's music education. The atmosphere felt completely different from that unforgettable night months earlier. Instead of anxiety, excitement filled every corner of the venue. Children carrying handmade signs laughed as they entered the arena with their families. Volunteers hurried through the hallways, decorating tables with colorful flowers and banners. Music floated gently from the stage as technicians completed the final sound checks. Felix smiled. This place feels smaller now. Hyunjin laughed. Or maybe we're just carrying less fear. Before rehearsals began, the production director gathered everyone on stage. Have someone I'd like you to meet. An older gentleman walked slowly toward them. His silver hair reflected the stage lights, and years of experience could be seen in the calm confidence with which he carried himself. Felix recognized him immediately from the investigation report, the retired lighting supervisor, the man who had anonymously delivered the photograph and the flash drive. He bowed politely. I'm sorry I frightened all of you. Felix quickly shook his head. You helped us. Only wanted people to look carefully before making assumptions. Hyunjin stepped forward and offered his hand. Thank you. Older man smiled warmly. Sometimes experience teaches us that truth deserves patience. Words lingered in everyone's minds long after the conversation ended. That evening the charity concert began beneath thousands of glowing lights. When Felix and Hyunjin stepped onto the stage together, they instinctively glanced upward. Every lighting structure had been carefully inspected. Every cable had been replaced, every safety measure had been strengthened. The stage no longer represented fear, it represented growth. The audience erupted into cheers as the opening music filled the arena. Felix caught Hyunjin's eye. This time, neither of them needed words. One smile was enough. They performed with a freedom that had been missing for far too long. Every note carried confidence. Every movement reflected trust. Every shared glance reminded them how easily misunderstandings could be overcome when people chose honesty over silence. After the final song, the audience remained standing in a long ovation. Children waved glowing light sticks high above their heads while families applauded with joyful smiles. As confetti drifted gently through the air, Felix quietly whispered, "I'm glad we never let one difficult day define us." Hyunjin looked across the sea of lights. Neither did the people who believed in us. They bowed together, grateful not only for the applause, but for every challenge that had taught them the importance of listening before judging, speaking before assuming, and trusting before fearing. Long after the arena lights dimmed and the final audience members returned home, the stage stood peacefully beneath the quiet ceiling. The place that had once witnessed uncertainty had become a symbol of resilience. Some stories ended with dramatic victories. Others ended with quiet understanding. For Felix and Hyunjin, the greatest triumph was never solving a mystery. It was discovering that the strongest friendships are built not on perfect days, but on the courage to face imperfect ones together. And as they walked out of the arena beneath a sky filled with countless stars, they carried no secrets, no resentment, and no unanswered questions, only the certainty that whatever tomorrow might bring, they would meet it side by side.